Welcome to Future Trends, where we examine the latest stories reshaping tomorrow's international dynamics. This week's headlines: Iran internet access threat, Sudan harvest concerns, coalition of nations opposing illegal settlements in West Bank, Russia hits Kyiv with hypersonic ballistic missile, bank CEO tells staff to not fight AI, and Meta social media addiction decision. Starting with politics, Turkey's pro-Kurdish party condemns ousting of main opposition. A court ruling removed the leadership of the main opposition, CHP, before a police operation evicted the leaders from the party's headquarters. Riot police fired tear gas and forced their way into the Republican People's Party's headquarters in Ankara, evicting ousted leader Özgür Özel, whose party has rejected the ruling as a judicial coup and vowed to fight it. Former Finance Minister Wadagni sworn as Benin's new president. Wadagni, an economist with a reputation as a technocrat who embodies continuity with Talon's two mandates, was elected April 12th with 94% of the ballots. His sole opponent, Paul Haunkpe, was easily beaten, and Haunkpe's party quickly joined forces with Wadagni's party in the parliament. Venezuela's Machado vows another run for presidency, return from exile. Machado announced that she plans to return from exile to her home country by the end of 2026 before running for presidency. It is still unclear whether Venezuela will hold a presidential election, with the U.S. administration throwing support behind acting leader Rodriguez, who has opened up Venezuelan oil industry to U.S. investment amid the fallout of the Iran war. Coalition of nations opposing illegal settlements in West Bank. The Israeli government is undermining stability in the West Bank as settler violence reaches unprecedented levels, a coalition of Western countries says, as its leaders call for an end to construction of Israeli settlements. It says breach international law. Australia joined the UK, Italy, France, Germany, Canada, Norway, the Netherlands and New Zealand in issuing a joint statement. Protests escalate in Bolivia's capital. Miners accuse the government of selling natural resources and ruling by decree, demanding that it resigns. Weeks of unrest have caused severe shortages of food and basic goods, with blocked roads driving prices sharply higher. With inflation at 14%, Bolivia is facing its worst economic crisis in decades. Moving to stories in conflict, how Iran wants to use internet access as leverage in the war. Iran is considering charging the world's largest tech companies to use the underwater internet cables crossing the Strait of Hormuz to increase economic pressure on the West. Encouraged by its wartime blockade, Iran wants to charge companies like Meta, Google, Microsoft and Amazon licensing fees to use the at least 7 cables that lie beneath the strait. Russia hits Kyiv with hypersonic ballistic missile. Russia used its powerful Oreshnik missile for a third time in Ukraine as part of a large attack on Kyiv and its surrounding region that killed at least 4 people and injured approximately 100. France bans far-right Israeli Security Minister Ben-Gvir. The ban comes as global outrage grows over Israel's treatment of activists detained while trying to deliver aid to Gaza. Calls for EU sanctions are growing as Ben-Gvir faces criticism for his hardline policies. Myanmar's ruling military junta said it regained control of border towns. On the Thai border, Naypyidaw recaptured the border town of Mortaung, a major export hub that was previously under the control of a rebel coalition led by the Karen National Union. On the Indian border, Myanmar recaptured Tonsang, a town that had been held by Chin ethnic militias and allies from the country's pro-democracy movement. Nigeria's military kills 175 Islamic State fighters. In a series of joint air and ground attacks with the assistance of the US, the strikes purportedly targeted financial hubs, weapons caches, and other strategic IS assets. If Nigeria's official death toll is accurate, it represents a rapid expansion of Nigerian capabilities following the arrival of US advisors and military hardware. Now for the latest economics news. China overtakes US as top goods trading partner for most countries globally. 25 years ago, the US was the world's dominant trading power, and only 33 countries traded more with China than America. China has become the dominant trade partner across much of the Middle East, South America, Asia, and Africa. Lesotho and Eswatini are the only African countries that trade more with the US than China, and Israel remains the only major economy in the Middle East or Indo-Pacific that trades more with the US. Putin leaves China without pipeline deal. Russia had been urgent seeking resolution of the long-stalled gas pipeline during the visit to Beijing by the Russian president. Thailand's trade deficit hits record $10 billion as imports rise. It compared with a median estimate of $5.3 billion as imports outpaced exports for a seventh straight month. The trend of strong imports and a widening trade deficit is likely to continue if energy prices remain elevated and the artificial intelligence boom continues to fuel trade flows, putting further pressure on the baht. Cuba receives China rice shipment amid US threats, blackouts. The shipment is the first batch of 60,000 tons of rice that Beijing has pledged to help combat a dire economic situation in the communist country, which has only been exacerbated since the US removed Venezuelan President Maduro in January and halted exports of oil from Venezuela to Cuba. Iran poses new threat to harvests in hunger-stricken Sudan. Farmers said rises in global fuel and fertilizer costs resulting from the Iran conflict will force them to reduce summer planting, limiting food production in a country with 40% of the population already facing a hunger crisis. Staple domestic crops like sorghum and millet and sesame, a key export, are likely to be affected. Sudan is especially vulnerable to the aftershocks of the Iran conflict, relying on the Gulf for over half of its fertilizer needs. Turning to development, 1 in 3 Japan firms using or considering AI robots. The Japanese government has introduced the AI robots with the aim of addressing chronic labor shortage and to cement its position as a world-leading industrial robot supplier. However, 2/3 of firms said they have no plans to deploy them. Argentina confirms withdrawal from World Health Organization. The Milei government highlighted the need to maintain its health sovereignty. It confirmed ties with PAHO will be maintained for procurement of vaccines. China overhauls hukou system. Changes to its social insurance program for migrant workers could narrow urban-rural divides in the country and unlock new streams of economic growth. Beijing moved to ease residency restrictions on coverage, removing a hurdle that required people working in Chinese cities to claim benefits in their home regions. Unregulated miners in Sudan search for gold amid economic hardship. Many miners say rising fuel prices, electricity cuts, and the collapse of agriculture forced them into the dangerous industry. There are thousands of small-scale operations across Sudan where gold mining has become closely linked to the conflict between the military and the paramilitary rapid support forces. Large quantities of gold have been smuggled out of the country to finance armed groups controlling mining areas in Darfur and Kordofan. Despite the risks, many Sudanese say mining remains their only source of income. Sudan produced 70 tons of gold last year, generating nearly $1.8 billion in revenue. Don't fight AI, bank CEO tells staff amid job cuts. HSBC CEO Georges El-Hederi told staff that we all know generative AI will destroy certain jobs and will create new ones. The comments came after banking rival Standard Chartered said it would remove almost 8,000 jobs to replace lower-value human capital with technology. While banks have been hesitant to publicly discuss how the implementation of AI will impact the scale of job loss, these comments from 2 of the world's biggest banks highlight how this is beginning to change as AI becomes more capable at completing tasks previously completed by people. Finally, our social news. Common asthma drug helps fight hard-to-treat cancers, including aggressive breast cancers. Scientists found that blocking a protein best known for its role in asthma enhances cancer immunotherapy in preclinical models. The research finds that cystinyl leukotriene receptor 1, a protein found on many cells, may be hijacked by tumors to turn important immune cells into sleeper agents that work for the cancer instead of against it. WHO chief says fast-moving Ebola epidemic is outpacing response efforts. The head of the World Health Organization said the fast-moving Ebola outbreak in Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda had already led to a suspected 220 deaths. Indian businesses look for acquisitions abroad as domestic growth slows. 162 Indian countries spent more than $18 billion on acquisitions abroad in 2025, a 34% increase from the previous year. Sun Pharmaceuticals agreed to pay $8.9 billion to acquire women's health and biosimilars firm Organon and Company, marking the biggest overseas acquisition by an Indian firm in nearly 2 decades. The rush to invest overseas reflects dissatisfaction with the domestic business environment and better diversification and capacity-building opportunities internationally. As cocoa prices fall, real chocolate making a comeback. The tripling of cocoa prices in 2024 to above $12,000 a metric ton in 2024, due to disease and adverse weather, prompted chocolate makers to shrink their bar sizes, introduce alternatives, and add more fruits, nuts, and wafers. A 70% downturn in cocoa futures from late 2024 onwards promises lower shelf prices, a move away from alternatives, and higher cocoa content in bars. Hershey and Reese's have promised a return to high cocoa content and return to original recipes beginning in 2027. Meta settles social media addiction case with U.S. school district. The Breathitt School District in Kentucky was set to trial the first case attempting to make social media companies cover the costs of fighting a mental health crisis, allegedly caused by the company's platforms. The school district was seeking $60 million in damages. The district settled the same case last week with TikTok, Snap Inc., and Google's YouTube, and 1,200 additional school districts have filed cases against Meta. That's your Future Trends update for this week. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time with more stories reshaping our world.